what I've done here is you can see one door here. There's actually another door behind the camera that you can't see. And what I've done is I have aligned the doors so that right now the bottoms are facing me. And I took a, if you'll excuse me for just a second, step off camera. And what I did was I took a 6-foot level that I have and I put it up against each side of the door. And what I'm going to do then is just make sure that, you know, there's no bow in the wood, because it could happen where I put in those little pieces of foam that we talked about earlier, and now maybe I've got a little bow in one end or the other. Again, not significant, but it's but I want to make sure it's pretty solid. So I could look down through the gap between the level and the side here, and I don't see any daylight coming through. There's no wobble from the level back and forth, so I know it's not crowned or, you know, concave either. And I could check the same thing on the other side, and when I checked this side, what I found was there is a slight bow. I mean, it's very slight. It's like an 1/8 of an inch difference at the top than at the middle. So I don't want that bow to be touching another door, because then you won't be able to close them nice and tight together. So you pick your best sides and you face them together if you're making twin doors or double doors. If you're not, if you're just making one, then it really doesn't matter unless you're butting up against the wall and you really care about that extra 1/8 of an inch somewhere at the top. Okay, so I've done that to both doors, and what I've done then is I've picked the best looking faces. You know, if there were any blemishes in the finish, I've picked the best looking faces of the door to be oriented in the right way, along with the sides that I want facing each other. And I took a silver Sharpie, if I can find it. You should always have a silver Sharpie. It writes on dark wood, dark stain, metal, which we're going to talk about in a minute. It's really good to have one of these things around. And no, I don't get paid by Sharpie to say that. So what I've done is on the bottom of the door where no one's going to see it, I've marked left door bottom and right door bottom, and I put 2 arrows facing each other so that if I'm really stupid that day, I can at least see that the arrows should be touching each other. So the tops are going to be what receive the steel straps that the doors will be mounted to, and the pulleys will be mounted to, or the wheels, so that we can slide it across the track. So I will turn these doors around when I actually attach them so that the tops are now facing me, now that I have the bottom marked. So I wanted to talk a little bit before we get into the steel and mechanicals portion of the barn door build, and talk about cutting steel. So the steel that we're going to be using is a cold rolled steel, which it still has some, you know, deposit on it. It's not the cleanest process, and it's 1/4 of an inch thick. So that's a lot of material to get through. Now, there's a few cutting tools that you can use that'll make quick work of it. And I wanted to show you a couple of alternatives, not because I get paid for any of this stuff. I just like you guys to see what's out there. So obviously, I don't have it out right now. It's under a bunch of stuff right now. But there's a Sawzall. If you guys have ever seen a Sawzall, it's a reciprocating saw. You know, it's got a handle. It looks like a big giant gun, and if you pull the trigger, you get a reciprocating blade out the end. And you can fit that with a metal blade. You can clamp the metal to the table, and you can saw it off to the point that you need. That's probably where most of us would be at as a homeowner. You can also do a hacksaw, like a regular, regular just standard hand hacksaw. That works too. It's going to take you a while to get through some of these cuts, but it's manageable and everything like that. But in working with metal, I found 2 other products. I actually have a chop saw, which I'm not going to show you either because it's put away. I don't really use it anymore. But you've seen them. It looks just like a regular chop saw, like a woodworking chop saw, except it's fitted with an abrasive wheel, and you basically just cut the steel like you would cutting a piece of wood. The problem I have with those is they create an awful lot of sparks and an awful lot of metal debris, dust, like that black carbon from the sparks of metal that you get, and it gets everywhere. So I will only use that if for some reason I need to bring it on a job and I can have 2 people working at once or something like that. That's fine. So I don't really use the abrasive chop saw. You can use a handheld grinder fitted with a cutoff blade. You know, that's one way. The 2 tools I'm going to show you are a little bit more expensive, but I use them a lot, so I invested in them, in the more expensive tool. The first one is this Milwaukee. I'm sure there are other brands, but Milwaukee is one of my favorites when it comes to kind of heavy duty tools. Again, not sponsored by them or anything, so I can tell you what's good and what I think is not. So this is just a regular, but it's a portable bandsaw. And you plug it in, and basically you put your steel down, and you pull the trigger, and you cut down through the piece of metal, just like you would do a Sawzall. It's a little bit more easy to work for me than a Sawzall, but you know, it's to each his own. I'm not going to be using that on this project. Again, this is more of a portable device that I like to take on the jobs with me, that I have to do some metal cutting. The tool that I'm going to be using, and again, it's kind of like yoga or an exercise class. I'm giving you very many options depending on your pocketbook, you know, the amount of time. I've been having some email back and forth with a viewer who was asking me a lot of questions about what tools to buy, whether this tool is better than that tool. I don't own every tool, and I haven't owned every tool, so I can't give 100% recommendations, and I certainly will tell you what I found out there, but if I haven't used it, I can't recommend it. I mean, it's just like you buy at your own risk. Somebody wanted to ask me about buying lumber on eBay. If I can't see it and touch it and look at it and make sure it's straight, or I don't have the tools to flatten it, I'm not going to buy it. But in any case, tools are typically fall into 2 categories. The first lesson I'll tell you is you usually get what you pay for. Usually a little more expensive tool is the better way to go if you can afford it and if you think you're going to be using it. If you're going to just be using your kitchen, doing your kitchen cabinets one time and you're never going to build cabinets after that, don't invest in a big set of these tools that are specifically designed for building cabinets. You don't need a big router, you don't need a big router table and all this other kind of stuff. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents. And the other thing is, you buy what you can afford. If you think you're going to be doing more, then go ahead and do it. This guy is like one of my favorite tools. It is a less expensive version of a horizontal bandsaw. So everybody, if you've known what a bandsaw is, it stands here vertically, and usually you push your pieces around on a table that's in front of the blade that's circulating around. This is a vertical bandsaw, and I got it from a company called Trick Tools. This thing is awesome. I mean, it's one of the options on it that I like is you can actually set it to where there's a counterweight in the back, and you can adjust the counterweight so that you can actually set the saw down on the piece of metal after you start it, and then you can walk away. The weight of the saw will actually, further it down into the piece until it's completely cut, and then when it falls through the piece, it shuts off. So there's no, you don't have to come back. That's actually a spoiled feature that I like. I don't have to stand there and use the saw 100% of the time if I've got a couple of pieces to cut through, etc. like that. So basically the way this works is I'm going to take one of these pieces of steel. I'm going to go ahead and put it in the clamp. And I'm only telling you this not because you have to buy it, but because there are a lot of people who work with metal too, and maybe they haven't seen something like this. It took me a long time to find this, by the way. I don't know why. I actually ordered a jet portable bandsaw, horizontal bandsaw, which just was a monster thing, and I was willing to give up the floor space in the shop to have that thing because of how much I use it. I got it, I put it together, I tuned it and everything, and it was just a piece of junk. And I'm not saying anything bad about Jet per se. Maybe it was just the model that I got. They get decent ratings on a lot of their tools. It just wasn't for me, so I boxed it up. I mean, it's like a 300-pound box. I boxed it up and sent it back. And I got this instead. Now, this was a little bit more expensive. It was around $700. I think they have one for $500 that you can get, which has a little less powerful motor if you're going to be doing small metal. But I just think it's awesome. And I'll just very quickly show you how it works. I'm basically going to line this up like so. Put the clamp in position. And then all you do, and I'm sorry I'm going to turn my back to you, but or maybe I can't. So all you're going to do is turn the saw on, and there's a button in the back, or there's a trigger on the handle. It's weird because I'm looking at it from the opposite angle I usually cut from. So you can certainly use the handle trigger, or you can push a button in the back. It turns the saw on. You lift it up and set it down. And then you can just walk away. And as you can see, it takes a little longer, but if I'm walking away and able to set up something else, it's great. And as you can see, it's going through the metal, slowly. If I come back, I can lean on it a little to have it go through a little quicker. And then it's done. And you lift, and I mean, this thing can take like a very small sliver. This is like a big sliver, right? But it can take a pretty small 1/16 sliver off of the end of a piece of steel if you needed to. So I really love this tool. So you'll see me use this tool frequently, but I did want to point out a bunch of other options that you can use. There are definitely more affordable, but the trade-off in all of these tools, like I was talking before, is time versus money. It's almost always time versus money. If you have a hand tool, it might take you a little bit longer to get the setup and get the thing cut than a tool like this. But again, there's always a cost trade-off, and it's almost always time versus money. Like I said, you can get a 1 horsepower or 1.5 horsepower router, and you can try making raised panel cabinet doors with that. But in order for not to burn out the motor, you should take a couple of passes. That takes time for a cheaper router. If you get a 3.25 or more horsepower router, then you're going to be able to blitz through a raised panel door with the panel bit much faster, but it is more money. So there's always a justification or a balance that you have to call. I get a lot of people, like I said, asking me for recommendations on tools, and it's hard to give them because, again, it's all about, I don't know your specific situation. I don't know if you're going to be building cabinets in every room of your house, or you're deciding to start your own cabinet building hobby and experiment on your friends' houses. That's fine too. But in any case, it's always that trade-off that you have to justify yourself based on what it is that you want. All right, so I'm going to stop this video because I probably talked way too much, and I'm going to start another video for the actual metalwork on the doors.